Bonsoir, messieurs et dames, chers invités. Nous vous prions de nous excuser. Nous savons que nous sommes un peu bousculés par le temps, mais nous allons passer à cette autre session. Alors, justement, comme nous sommes un peu fatigués, on va faire un peu d'exercice et puis on va passer d'une langue à l'autre sans prévenir. Comme ça, tout le monde pourra avoir son traducteur à l'oreille, n'est-ce pas? So thank you again, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests. We're very happy that you could make it to this session today, where we'll be talking about our support to the direct access entities. And just in order to keep us on our toes and to fight fatigue and jet lag, we decided that we will be switching without warning from French to English, and everybody's going to have that nice piece of jewelry on their ears. So my name is Kabishi Chilumba. I'm a regional manager for the region of Africa, overseeing French-speaking Africa and Rwanda. Very happy to be here with you today so that we'll be discussing the support that we are bringing to our direct access entities. So, however, just to continue with the general theme that we have today, the GCF will like not to be doing too much of the speaking, and we'll be having some of our guests that will be helping out. So I would like then to be inviting them in the order that they'll be appearing to come and join us at the podium. So we will start with my colleague, Mr. Urvaksh Patel, who is our regional manager over the Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Urvaksh, kindly join us at the podium. Then he'll be followed by Miss Claudia Godfrey. Claudia is from Profonampe, one of our accredited entities, and she'll be here in order to share the experience that we're having on the South-South dialogue with what we call our CPDAE. And then after Claudia, we're going to be having, and we'll ask them already to come up here, we're going to have Mr. Malik Ndiaye, directeur général à la Banque Agricole. La Banque Agricole est une de nos entités accréditées, une banque du secteur privé du Sénégal. Merci bien, DG. And then we'll have Mr. Keith Nichols, who is from one of our prized accredited entities from the Caribbean, 5Cs. Thank you for joining us. Mr. Nichols is the head of Program Development and Management Unit at 5Cs. Followed by Mr. Jack Rossiter, who is a climate finance advisor of SPC. And as you know, coming from the Pacific. Thank you very much, Jack, for joining us. And finally, we have our colleague, Mr. Albert Lihalaka. Albert, who will be joining us in order to share some insights from our independent integrity unit. So Albert may join us a little bit late. We want also to point out that we will be, oh, thank you, Albert. Please do join us. Good of you to be here. And then also want to say that we do have resource persons that are in the room and that will be happy to intervene with us to answer some questions. They're in the person of Ms. Fola Anyurinde, who is our senior portfolio manager at the DPM. And she's right there, Fola, thank you, as well as our colleague, Mr. Nazim Wasti, who is a project preparation facility and technical assistance specialist. So without more ado, I'd like to start maybe with this idea. So we're here today in order to discuss not just project implementation, project development challenges that are faced by our direct access entities, but most interestingly, to explore the solutions that the GCF can offer and that also other partners can offer in order to address those challenges, and then also explore the existing avenues that we have for supporting them. So a little bit more than a year ago, we did develop an approach for the direct access entities. We are honored to have Urvaksh, who actually led the development of that process. So Urvaksh is with us here. And then without further ado, Urvaksh, could you please share with us some thoughts about this approach for direct access entities? Over to you.
So thank you very much, Kabishi, and good afternoon. Esteemed guests. I'm going to stand because it's a presentation. Of course, the reflections from the rest of our panel are their reflections, so I think it may be from the seats. But First of all, let me just say that, this DAE action plan was quite some time in the making. It is a reflection of lots of thoughts that we had collected, lots of reflections that we had collected from direct access entities at the time. And it also is a corroboration of work that was done by our independent evaluation unit. And the reflections that you will be seeing on some of the slides, it is not comprehensive. The full action plan is actually published online, and so you can access that online. But the few points that I will highlight today are perhaps the ones that may be most helpful for most of you in the room. So with that, let me just set the stage a little bit on the next slide, please. Let me just, thank you. I'm not sure it's working. Yeah, the green one, right? In the middle. Got you. Sorry about that. Thank you. Thank you. So let me just set the stage a little bit on direct access. As many of you may know, direct access is really a unique aspect of the GCF business model. They play a very important role in establishing the country ownership principle that the GCF expounds on. And more importantly, it was also reiterated within the board's updated strategic plan that there's a need to increase direct access in the portfolio. As of now, the last calculations that we had done for this report about a year ago was that it was somewhere around, I believe, 17% or so. So quite a far way to go. But nevertheless, this action plan was done with the ambition to try and increase the share of the DAE funding in the portfolio. And how can we do that? Well, we first needed to start with understanding what some of the challenges were. And the first challenge that we recognized is that when we looked across the portfolio of direct access entities, there was really a limited diversity of the types of organizations that comprised the direct access entities. They were mostly public sector organizations that were working on grant instruments. So as you can imagine, there's not too much that GCF can really do with organizations that are primarily focused. By the way, also they were accredited for small size. So it's about up to $10 million per project. So there's not too much that we could have done to work with these organizations to go beyond 10 million. Most of them were accredited for category C, and again, public sector types of organizations. So we had a limited diversity. The second was that we recognized there were some serious project development challenges that those organizations were facing, and I'll touch on that in one of the subsequent slides. And then, of course, one very revealing insight was that there's really weak coordination at the national level between the NDAs and the direct access entities. And some of you may recognize that. And for others, it may be a surprising revelation simply because the NDA offices, if we have some NDAs in this room, may feel that, well, there is sufficient coordination going on. However, when you look at the country programming processes, the readiness support processes that the GCF provides, and other envelopes, adaptation planning, often there is a mismatch between the expectations and the priorities that the countries articulate within those plans and within the requests of those support windows, and just completely mismatches with the actual national entity that they have nominated or accredited. And so we noticed that that was a serious challenge as well. So how do we address some of these? And again, the report is much more comprehensive, or the plan is much more comprehensive, but let me touch on three of them, and I'll end, given the time constraint we have this afternoon, I'll end with my last slide, which is the next one, that talks about a very particular support, which we have not yet, as a secretariat, we have not yet fully implemented, but are strongly considering. So the first is supporting for a strategic nomination and accreditation of DAEs. And this really touches on the heart of the country ownership principle that GCF espouses. And And again, it goes back to the country programming process that happens in countries. Countries have very interesting and ambitious pipelines, but of course, ultimately, they may have to resolve to international entities in helping to implement what those pipelines are. And if accessing funds directly from the GCF is of priority to an NDA or to a country, then those projects are going to need to align with the kinds of nominations that the country wants to put forward. Now, we have regional desks that can work with NDAs and guide NDAs in this process. Kabishi and myself, obviously, are two colleagues here among several who can help the NDAs in the strategic nomination of potential direct access entities. But there's a lot of other sources that are available, especially through readiness, that we are really there to help and support on. And our NDAs just need to really be willing to take that guidance, because sometimes the concept of country ownership often gets confused with the imposition of certain ideas or thoughts that the Secretariat may have. But in fact, the decision entirely rests with the governments, rests with the NDAs. But we have seen now through the maturation of the Secretariat's time what has worked well and what has not worked well. And one of the things that has not worked well is countries nominating the wrong types of entities with the kinds of pipelines that they want to develop. And so we need to overcome a bit of those barriers. The unicorn, as we call it, are organizations that can work in adaptation, private sector, and of course, that they would be national organizations. Those are really of interesting character for GCF support. I've touched a bit on the capacity building and institutional strengthening aspects through the readiness program, the readiness window. At the Secretariat, we can certainly do a better job of strengthening those. We are going through an exercise right now where we are rethinking about the strategy of readiness, and we will think more about how to incorporate direct access support in this strategy. The other thing, some of you may have attended the session this morning, for example, on climate science development as being one of the challenges that has been recognized by countries when it comes to the formulation of project proposals. And we are looking to somehow modulate that as a standardized offering in readiness. And so there are other discussions as well on how we can capacitate and strengthen direct access entities. Let me share my last slide, and that's on this last point, which is end-to-end support. Now, what we noticed was that a lot of countries requested readiness support to develop concept notes, and those concept notes ultimately just languished. There was no entity to take it forward, and we have financed or funded to the tune of well over 100 concept notes, and basically nothing has moved with a lot of them. And some of them are very interesting ideas. But the reason that nothing has moved is because the kind of support that the Secretariat was providing was often very much insulated to any one of these steps along the DAE pathway. So whether it was actually on the nomination process or something related to PPF requests or any of these other steps along the pathway, it would be delivered. And then basically that would be the last step. And that could be because the NDA changed or, multiple different reasons that caused that isolation, basically. And what we're attempting to do now, we're in the process of thinking through this, is how do we get delivery partners to basically provide this end-to-end support? So something from nomination all the way to proposal, board approval. So happy to get any of your thoughts on this. Again, the document is available online. And thank you very much for your attention, and over to you, Kabishi. So grateful. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Urvaksh. Thank you very much for these insights. There are quite a few things to remember, but I was quite interested in what you said about the strategic nomination accreditation. This is a topic that often leads to some interesting discussions with NDA, but it's actually crucial in the capacity that the countries have to implement their projects. And also another thing that I do like is this idea that the countries could leverage the Secretariat in order to be able to better implement their country ownership, be it in the choice of the accredited entities or in the building of the capacity of those. So thank you very much again, Urvash. So we'll come back to some of these, but we'll go now and ask Miss Claudia, if maybe you can share with us, Claudia, given that you have been kind enough to lead along with our colleagues of CSE these South-South exchange on these CPDAE project. Maybe you can tell us a little bit what that consists of. So over to you, Claudia.
Thank you, Kavishi. And thank you very much for this space to talk about the community of practice. I am going to switch to Spanish, so if you don't mind, you can use your facilities for translation. The community of practice is not a project, it's an initiative from DAEs and NIEs. We are accredited entities from Greek Climate Fund and Adaptation Fund, both or one each independent. So I'm going to switch to Spanish. So can I use this? This one? This? So, ¿para qué tenemos comunidades de práctica? Ustedes seguro pertenecen a varias. Una comunidad de práctica es un grupo que se junta por alguna razón con un propósito común en el cual buscas construir confianza y puedes generar conocimiento, luego aprender de ella y colectivamente generar inteligencia que finalmente implica un conocimiento que te permita avanzar. Y eso es lo que buscamos con la comunidad de práctica, que finalmente tiene una serie de beneficios que pueden ser desde poder simplemente generar confianza, como les mencionaba hace un momento, como crear mejores prácticas para todos. ¿Y qué es la comunidad de práctica? Nosotros decimos CPDAE, es la comunidad de práctica de comunidades de acceso, de entidades de acceso directo, que lo que buscamos es tener un mejor camino para poder acceder al financiamiento climático. Nosotros en este momento somos 30 miembros. ¿Pueden levantar la mano? ¿Quiénes son DAEs aquí? Aizata. DAEs, ¿sí? DAEs. Los que quieran ser miembros, me cuentan más tardecito. Nosotros somos 30 miembros en este momento y hemos seguido un camino que viene desde el 2016 en las reuniones anuales que tenemos organizadas por el Fondo de Adaptación, quien fue el primero que nos ayudó y empujó para caminar y transitar por este camino. Y lo que ven en esta línea muy rápidamente es un hito que marca una reunión en Durban en el año 2019, donde se forma principalmente un comité de 6 personas que pertenecemos a 3 grupos de idioma, español, inglés y francés. Mi colega Aizata de CSI de Senegal es parte del equipo, también mi colega Meriem de Marruecos, están nuestros colegas de Micronesia, Tamara está aquí también en la sala. Nosotras somos un grupo de 6 chicas que hemos estado empujando que la comunidad pueda lograr algunos pasitos para poder conformar y tener una sólida comunidad de miembros. Entonces, la comunidad ahorita cuenta con un financiamiento de readiness regional que es de aproximadamente 1.8 millones de dólares y que ha sido un trabajo conjunto con el Fondo Verde y el Fondo de Adaptación, y el agradecimiento a OLADE, que ha sido uno de los principales actores ayudándonos a poder sacar adelante este proyecto. El NDA que nos apoya y que ha presentado este proyecto es el NDA de Perú, quien ha tenido un aporte significativo para esto. Me salté no sé cómo regresar. Eso. ¿Cuáles son los retos de la comunidad? Bueno, nosotros tenemos que asegurar la colaboración, el peer-to-peer collaboration, que es un reto. Cuando nos juntamos, nos vemos, nos contamos las cosas, lo que estamos pasando, nos ayudamos, pero cuando nos regresamos a nuestras labores, es más difícil de poder compartir, incrementar la visibilidad de la comunidad. Nosotros, como les cuento, venimos trabajando ya desde hace 2 años, un poco más, con mayor intensidad, pero nos falta enganchar a los miembros, también implementar la mejor plataforma para poder compartir documentos, experiencias, cosas buenas, cosas probablemente no tan buenas, y desde los miembros, la eficiencia interna de capacidades para, por ejemplo, acreditación y reacreditación, para poder seguir el paso al fondo, las políticas nuevas que se presentan, qué nuevo tenemos que tenemos que cumplir. Además, tenemos una barrera obvia sobre el tema del lenguaje. Tenemos que ver de qué manera podemos solucionarlo, esto a nivel de los miembros. Hay una falta de claridad y entendimiento desde el lado de nosotros, las DAEs, en algunos requerimientos que nos pide el fondo a veces. El desarrollo de notas conceptuales, como lo mencionó mi colega previamente, es un reto para nosotros también. Mapear cuál efectivamente pueden ser esos argumentos climáticos importantes para desarrollo de propuestas y finalmente la implementación, por ejemplo, de las salvaguardas en proyectos. ¿Qué expectativas tenemos? Nosotros lo que esperamos es tener una red de instituciones, de entidades acreditadas que efectivamente estén fortalecidas y que puedan a través de la comunidad crecer. Además, queremos que las capacidades estén dentro de nosotros y no estemos dependiendo de los consultores, que además a veces son pocos y muy difíciles de conseguir para poder desarrollar las propuestas robustas que queremos presentar y tener esta relación muy cercana con el NDA, que también es algo que se mencionó en la ponencia anterior. Y este apoyo finalmente nos pueda permitir acceder rápidamente a este financiamiento climático que es el que necesitamos. Para cerrar, hay algunos temas importantes que nosotros como DAEs esperamos del fondo y por ejemplo, uno es que tengan este quote de Smart Easy, ¿no? Tenemos lineamientos, tenemos algunos manuales que necesitamos una guía de explicación del manual para poder entenderlo, ¿no? A veces están escritos de una manera un poco retadora de entender y quizás facilitarnos ese acceso a que sea sencillo podría ayudar mucho. El segundo es cuando nos dan feedback, ese feedback también debería de ser fácil de entender. Que los procesos sean fáciles de seguir y que, si es posible, puedan facilitar la información en los 3 idiomas. Un poco de flexibilidad y también entender que con webinars a veces no es suficiente, ¿no? Acercarse a nosotros y conversar con nosotros, ustedes que están sobre todo en el secretariado, es mucho más fácil entre nosotros, porque a veces vienen los consultores a hablar y nos entrevistan y nos preguntan, pero a veces estrechar la relación entre nosotros y ustedes creo que es mucho más beneficioso. Acá estamos conociendo a varios con los que nos hemos visto por Zoom y ha sido mucho más interesante esta relación. Y para cerrar, porque creo que ya me extendí muchísimo, a nuevas políticas, a nuevos marcos de inversión, a nuevas obligaciones de reporte, a nuevos compromisos de reporte, de indicadores de cambio climático, etcétera. Nosotros estamos listos para hacerlo, para seguir aprendiendo, porque es la mejora continua de organizaciones como nosotros, pero nosotros tenemos el techo bien alto y queremos llegar hasta ahí, pero necesitamos el apoyo de ustedes. Gracias.
Gracias, Claudia. Muchísimas gracias. We really appreciate your insights, and we take in particular notes of the fact that one of the objectives of the CPDA is to have those high quality projects. So actually there's a complete alignment with what the GCF also is trying to do. So now we're going to be asking for the other members that are here on the panel with us for their contribution. Et nous allons commencer avec Monsieur Malik Ndiaye. So we have some questions that we'd like all of you to address, and we'll just go in order, and then we'll ask you for 2 or 3 minutes, maybe to answer these 2 questions. I know it sounds like not enough time, but we count on your abilities to summarize that. So we'd like to know from your stand, what are the key gaps and challenges that your organization has been facing with respect to developing projects for the GCF and or implementing GCF-funded projects, and including institutional capacity gaps, human capacity gaps, whichever type of gaps that you have. So that's a question that each of us will be addressing. But also we'd like for you to, and that we do that right away in order to take care of time, if you can tell us what some solutions that you can identify in order to address those gaps and overcome the challenges. So we're going to be starting with Monsieur Malik. À vous.
Merci Kabishi, merci beaucoup. Vous permettrez rapidement de remercier le GCF pour nous avoir invités à participer à ce panel important qui nous permettra certainement, après échange, d'améliorer le travail qui se fait entre les entités accréditées et le Fonds vert climat. Je voudrais aussi dire que nous avons effectivement, comme ça a été dit tantôt par le premier intervenant, sur le diagnostic, nous le partageons véritablement avec vous. Nous connaissons les difficultés, nous connaissons les limites et les contraintes auxquelles nous sommes tous confrontés entre, d'une part, les entités accréditées, les autorités nationales désignées, la communication, les relations avec le Fonds vert climat et l'ensemble des gaps qui ont été indiqués tantôt. Et je pense que c'est important. Alors, je pense qu'il y a plusieurs niveaux d'analyse, mais nous avons compris que il est important de réfléchir en termes d'écosystème au niveau national. C'est-à-dire, vous avez d'une part les entités accréditées, et au Sénégal, nous en avons 2, la Banque agricole et le Centre de suivi écologique. Le Centre de suivi écologique a démarré avec le grant, après elle a upgradé pour faire un peu les loans. Nous avons, en tant que banque, été accrédités accès direct pour les instruments de financement comme le prêt, les garanties et tout ce qui est capital. Et donc, il y a déjà à ce niveau-là plusieurs entités qui travaillent avec une autorité nationale désignée. Et les entités, les structures n'ont pas les mêmes habitudes, n'ont pas non plus les mêmes capacités. Et donc, si vous voulez demander, comme le fait le Fonds vert climat, d'avoir une approche qui permettrait en tout cas de respecter un certain nombre de standards, un certain nombre de règles, un certain nombre de normes et effectivement un certain nombre de capacités, dès lors on comprend vite qu'il y ait des difficultés. Donc la question qui est posée, c'est de dire comment faire pour qu'au niveau national, à la fois l'autorité nationale désignée et les entités accréditées puissent avoir des capacités qui leur permettent de pouvoir travailler au même rythme, avec la même ambition et la même volonté de délivrer rapidement sur les projets, sur les activités de readiness, etc. Et donc, c'est à ce niveau-là, en tout cas, que nous pensons qu'il est important de renforcer les capacités, ça a été dit tout à l'heure dans les propositions de solutions, renforcer les capacités des NDAE. Je pense que c'est important puisque nous sentons qu'à leur niveau déjà, il y a un certain nombre de difficultés à pouvoir coordonner parce que le travail aurait dû échoir, la coordination des activités readiness, des activités des DAI aurait dû échoir à l'entité nationale, à l'autorité nationale désignée. Ce que nous sentons peut-être c'est insuffisamment fait, si c'est le cas. En tout cas, c'est une préoccupation que nous avons de voir l'autorité nationale désignée jouer le rôle de coordinateur des activités des DAI au niveau national et d'impulser davantage en termes d'atteinte d'objectifs l'ensemble de l'écosystème national dans lequel nous évoluons. Alors, nous avons été accrédités, nous avons eu l'initiative pour passer rapidement sur une concept note de travailler avec un cabinet qui est basé à Nairobi. Donc, nous avons été chercher de la compétence jusqu'à Nairobi pour, en l'occurrence à Sainte, pour nous accompagner pour, dans le cadre de l'élaboration, la formulation de notre concept note. Et donc, ça nous a permis d'aller plus vite que l'ensemble des autres entités, certainement, qui n'ont pas cette opportunité d'avoir un cabinet capable de les accompagner et qui a de la compétence pour le faire, effectivement. Et c'est un élément important sur lequel je voudrais insister. Alors, l'autre élément, je pense que les questions de financement climatique, les questions de défis du climat, la prise en charge au niveau national, l'arrimage des programmes et des projets par rapport aux politiques nationales, et notamment les contributions désignées nationales, cet arrimage-là et cette référence obligatoire à cette politique nationale n'est pas toujours facile à comprendre. Il faut être vraiment dans le sujet, dans les problématiques de financement au quotidien pour comprendre de quoi on parle, pour comprendre qu'est-ce qu'on attend de chaque entité, de pouvoir justement formuler et faire sa part des choses. Parce qu'en tant que banque classique, c'est vrai, nous avons peut-être une vocation, disons, de financer le secteur agricole. C'est ça un peu la vocation de la banque agricole, contrairement aux autres banques qui ne financent pas l'agriculture. Et donc, nous avons une exposition aux risques climatiques plus forte. Et cette exposition au risque climatique nous pousse à réfléchir peut-être beaucoup plus que les autres sur les problématiques de couverture de risques climatiques pour convoquer l'assurance agricole, pour essayer de trouver des ressources appropriées et justement aller jusqu'à l'accréditation au Fonds vert climat. Mais dans d'autres contextes, chez d'autres acteurs, ces questions de finances climatiques ne les intéressent pas, ne posent des problématiques, même au niveau de la régulation, au niveau de la zone Afrique de l'Ouest. La régulation n'est pas encore au point. Aujourd'hui, la Banque centrale essaie d'organiser au niveau d'une task force les réflexions nécessaires pour implémenter le dispositif de supervision des banques en intégrant les risques ES. Et donc, j'ai été personnellement approché par un responsable de la Banque centrale, le vice-gouverneur, pour justement participer à cette task force. C'est donc pour dire que, dépendant des zones et des réalités locales, les niveaux, disons, et les prérequis et les situations de départ ne sont pas les mêmes. Donc, il est attendu de gros efforts pour les entités qui évoluent dans des pays où les questions climatiques ou les questions de réflexion sur la finance climatique ne sont pas achevées. Il est attendu de gros efforts. Et quand vous êtes de surcroît, en tout cas dans le vif du sujet, dans l'activité quotidienne, vous êtes effectivement attendu un peu en termes de délai. Et les délais sont relativement longs en termes de processus d'accréditation. Et après l'accréditation, qui n'est qu'une étape, il y a tout un ensemble d'activités à mener. Et si vous n'êtes pas accompagné, si vous êtes laissé seul, vous risquez d'avoir des difficultés à pouvoir, en tout cas, arriver à l'objectif qui est de mobiliser des ressources, qui est de faire en sorte que les promoteurs privés, les porteurs de projets climatiques puissent être accompagnés et financés dans le cadre du dispositif que le Fonds vert climat a mis en place au niveau de l'ensemble des pays. Donc, pour nous, il est important de renforcer les capacités des DAI, mais aussi de renforcer le niveau de coordination des autorités nationales désignées. Et en parlant de capacité, même dans les entités accréditées, effectivement, moi, j'ai donné l'exemple de la banque agricole. J'étais obligé d'aller recruter un spécialiste en environnement, M. Abdelaziz Diédiou, qui est là, qui s'occupe de ces problématiques-là. Et je suis allé recruter un responsable de suivi et évaluation aussi pour mettre l'accent sur le monitoring, pour préparer demain notre capacité à pouvoir suivre les projets mis en œuvre, etc. Donc, il y a un changement complet de, disons, de staffing et de façon de réfléchir quand on embrasse les problématiques de finances climatiques telles que nous les voyons, en tout cas au niveau de notre pays. Donc, en résumé, je ne voudrais pas trop parler, mais il est évident que autant il y a des opportunités quand vous embrassez la finance climatique, quand vous êtes à côté du Fonds vert climat, vous gagnez aussi, vous vous bonifiez en niveau de standard et en niveau d'organisation, en niveau de procédure, et ça c'est clair, nous l'avons aussi vécu. Autant aussi, il est important de continuer à renforcer les capacités internes pour permettre d'atteindre les objectifs qui sont assignés au DAI. Et mieux, il faudrait aussi, à mon sens, que l'autorité nationale désignée puisse avoir un rôle de coordination, des capacités assez renforcées pour accompagner les entités accréditées auprès du Fonds vert climat pour justement, ensemble, que nous puissions avoir un système dont les acteurs dialoguent bien, ont des capacités complémentaires, ont des objectifs qui peuvent être mesurés et ensemble se les fixe comme engagement à atteindre dans des délais très précis pour que justement nous puissions avancer dans le temps et pouvoir donner des résultats en termes de mobilisation de ressources et de mise en œuvre de projets. Merci.
Merci beaucoup, DG. Nous apprécions cela. Et now we're going to go to Mr. Keith. Keith, could you please tell us from 5C standpoint the key gaps and challenges that 5Cs has been facing with respect to project preparation and implementation? And thank you again for being mindful of time, Keith. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, thanks. And it's a pleasure to be here to share some of our insights with the audience and yourself as well. 5Cs works for 40 member states in the CARICOM region, 40 member states, and we're demand driven. We are accredited to the Green Climate Fund under the category B, and we have access of up to $50 million for projects. But for 40 member states implies that we have to satisfy the demand from countries to write full funding proposals or readiness proposals. That is a tall order. And what we have done internally is put in place a project development and management unit that I head that looks at separately writing the proposals under the project development and managing the implementation or facilitating the implementation at the national level. In writing the proposals, and there's a lot of work that goes into writing those proposals, the volume of information required by the GCF is challenging. We heard, I think, in day one and sometime this morning, of the burden of satisfying the full requirements of documentation and information. Now, we'll never have all the full range of skills at 5Cs to satisfy that process. We're an organization of 40 to 50 persons and compartmentalized to satisfy not just the GCF needs in the region, but others as well. So we hire consultants to help build those proposals. And there are lots of proposals, there are lots of consultants who understand climate change and climate variability and all those other things. Problem is, they don't fully understand GCF. So get the products from the consultants to reflect the quality and the bankable information required to build those projects is a challenge. And invariably, we find ourselves writing or correcting the work of the consultants to build bankable projects. Now, so how do we overcome this challenge? Maybe one of the very first things we need to do is to reduce the burden, the volume of information required for those proposals, whether they're readiness proposals or they're full funded proposals. And GCF needs to look to see how it can streamline, and we heard that in day one as well. How can we streamline the process and make it more efficient without compromising the integrity of the process? And it shouldn't be process driven. Obviously, we're doing this to satisfy benefits to our clients, And so we should be focusing on results and impact, long-term impact, as opposed to satisfying process. So there has to be some sort of efficiencies that are created in the system to allow us not only to deliver back the projects, but also to satisfy our client base and help them build resilience to climate change. And that's an important consideration for us. We work a lot with the country through readiness projects, and that's my last point. And the countries seem to focus on readiness upon readiness upon readiness. It's called readiness because it's preparing them, getting them ready for something else. And they need to graduate from managing readiness or asking for readiness support into a place where they can now access the climate financing directly and build their own competence to satisfy the resilience building requirements. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done in satisfying not only the needs of our clients, but that of the GCF, but it can be streamlined. So I end with that point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Keith. Excellent points that you made about not being process-driven, about streamlining, and also about the finality of readiness, which is for the countries to be able to submit their projects. So then we'll move to Jack from SPC. Jack, could you please also share with us your insights on the same question? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks very much for that. And that's a tough act to follow on Keith after he's mentioned half of my points. So thank you. And I must say I agree with all of those. And I think I'll change my tack a little bit here. And I think, rather than focusing on the frustrations that we have as DAEs in going through the GCF processes, we'll focus on the challenges that has on the countries that we serve and the people in need of the resources from GCF. And I think I'll focus on 3 points. First being time, second being context, and the third being an obsession with compliance. Time. The design timeframes in GCF are huge. And this has, several reasons behind it. As mentioned by Keith, the requirements and the level of detail required in GCF projects are very heavy. It's hard to get the consultants to be able to meet those challenges. But compounding that is inconsistency and a lack of transparency in the GCF review processes. Moving from one review process to another review process on different projects, we see large inconsistency and variability between the questions that we're getting from the GCF and in the transparency in the answers as to why we're having to comply to certain things. This means that we're unable to respond to certain questions when going through the review processes, which can lead to extensions of time. To put this in a bit of more real world context, on average, it's taking roughly 3 years from a project scoping idea to approval by the board. Following that, it takes about 6 months to a year to get a disbursement and incept the project. Following that, for an adaptation project, it's going to take a minimum of 5 years to see results and impact from that. So you're looking at a 9-year timeframe here. Now in the Pacific, that is a huge amount of time that we cannot afford. From 2015 to 2020, cyclones Pam and Harold ripped through the Pacific. Now, for a single country, Vanuatu, that led to loss and damages equaling close to $1 billion US, whilst a single GCF project is focusing on roughly $20 million is taking 9 years. The loss and damages in the next 9 years, whilst looking to program that, could be immense. So time is a major issue in programming these projects and something that I think really does need to be looked at carefully. And there are solutions to that, as mentioned, moving away from a process-driven approach and looking at streamlining it. So we're hearing about the SAP being streamlined. The last decision was to increase the SAP window, but without simplifying the process. And that's coming in slowly, as we've heard. That's for category C projects. We need it for category B projects that have impact on the ground. We need it to be more simplified. We need it to be faster. We need to be able to get that resources into the countries to help the people. So leading to my second point is context. In the Pacific, we've heard from several speakers about SIDS and how they are more challenging to operate in and to face these impacts against climate. We heard from Antigua Barbuda yesterday, indicating the impact, the challenges around costs in SIDS. I think it was indicated that, credit is 2 times more expensive in SIDS. The cost of procurement and materials is extortionate, especially in a region the size of the Pacific. It's the largest region in the world, and it's highly dispersed. The costs are immense, and we're getting loads of questions as to why our costs are so high in the Pacific without having what feels like, understanding or knowledge coming from the reviewers in the GCF, which makes it very hard for us to have to keep reinforcing the point as to what our context is and our situation is, which means we're having, huge amounts of questions that we just need to keep responding to time and time again. So that's cost. Data availability is something that's come up in several chats and presentations here. Data availability is low in the region and something that we do struggle with. And when we get through to the ITAP stages, we get a lot of comments, and we get a lot of comments from Secretariat for seeing those comments from the GCF, ITAP, sorry. So having some understanding of, the capacity, the gaps that we have in the data and being able to overcome those. I think it was, a session earlier on science and from Kevin at the GCF indicating that, it's the best available data that should be used for these projects. It doesn't have to be the perfect data that ITAP expects from, the countries that they sit in or the work that they're doing, but the best available data to that country. And proving that it should be enough to get this through to a GCF board. So that's context. And now my final point is on the obsession with compliance. Increasingly so, we're finding that through our review processes, 50% or more of our comments are not impact oriented or have a material impact on the outcomes of a project, but are more focused on the compliance issues of fiduciary and financial aspects or ESS related aspects that are covered under our accreditations. We spend a huge amount of time trying to prove ourselves, and something that we've spent 2 or 3 years through an accreditation process already proving. So it's a question to the GCF as to why we have to keep proving these for every single project and reposting them in our FAAs when it's already in our AMA. So I think the key message here to the GCF on that point is to please place more trust in your accredited entities who have passed that accreditation process and allow us to implement our projects with more efficiency, reduce the delays for the countries that we serve, and lead to more impact. I'll stop there. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack. Actually, no need to worry. You did excellent following on key steps, and thank you for pointing to those issues in particular of cost, of data, of context, as well as the compliance related focus now. Now, as you know, there are indeed multifaceted aspects to projects and readiness proposals when you come to the GCF, and some of the very important safeguards that we have to deal with integrity. So here we have the honor of having with us Albert Lihalaka, who is the deputy head of the Independent Integrity Unit. And we'd like you, Albert, maybe to give us, to share with us a few thoughts on the role of integrity in supporting project development and project implementation, and the resources that DAEs can utilize through your unit, the Independent Integrity Unit. Albert?
Thank you very much. I do appreciate the opportunity to speak in this forum and speak a little bit about the Independent Integrity Unit. Now, I would like to maybe preface my discussion here by providing a little bit of an introduction as to who we are. We haven't had the opportunity to engage with some of you. I think more closely, you've worked with the Secretariat and not had the exposure of IAU. So the IAU was established by the GCF board under the authority of the fund's governing instrument. We have mandated to conduct investigations into allegations of prohibited practices and prohibited practices such as fraud, collusion, coercion, and I think in the MDB world, it's sanctionable offenses. We also have a prevention mandate where we work proactively to try and mitigate any potential issues that result from integrity violations. So we've got programs that we institute that we hope to work with you to try and address and identify some of these concerns, and then look to find solutions to these integrity problems. Now, the IAU also has an operational independence. We report directly to the board through the Ethics and Audit Committee, which gives us an opportunity to be a little bit more flexible in terms of providing certain types of solutions. Now, that does not mean that we do not work in isolation. What we do is work very, very closely with our Secretariat colleagues to make sure that we provide the services that would be beneficial to the GCF and our counterparty stakeholders. Now, this question is very good because the DAEs, I think it's standardly observed here that there's a lot of obligations being put on your shoulders. And in terms of integrity, one of the things that our AMAs do is they put the onus of investigations onto your shoulders. Now, we do recognize that DAEs, that's not what it is that you want to do. You want to shift your focuses elsewhere. And this is where the Independent Integrity Unit provides opportunities. At least from an investigation standpoint, we could provide advisory services. We can work together to try and provide guidance, maybe even do joint investigations. Now, but those opportunities don't just stop in the investigation services. We do have capacity building and technical assistance programs that we can work together to institute, and that falls within our prevention mandate. Now, what we try and do is to, in terms of capacity building, the GCF has also explicitly stated in its policies and standards that it will provide these services. It will make sure that we have those opportunities made to our counterparties. A good example is really the standards on implementation of AML and CFT policies. I think that's page 12, paragraph 43 down. If any of you are interested, it articulates all the opportunities that are available. You also has advisory services where we provide guidance, conflict of interest, guidance on GCF integrity policies. We provide consultations. If you're interested in developing your integrity policies, we provide those opportunities. So please feel free to liaise with the GCF and the IIU on some of these opportunities. Another important element that we've talked about and we've had a little bit here today is our peer learning opportunities. And I'm sure maybe we can have an opportunity to work with our esteemed colleague here to address some of these concerns. I'm glad we've had the opportunity to hear from it, because this is really something very similar to what our colleagues are looking to do. We want to put like organizations together and together build the capacity so that we can address a lot of these issues that could hinder potential progress onto a project. Another important element that I would really kind of like to push forward and stress is the proactive approach to addressing integrity risks. One of the things that the IAU is doing is engaging in proactive integrity reviews. What this means is we work with our colleagues to identify potential risk areas or areas that are vulnerable to integrity violations. And then we will work collaboratively to address those issues. So PIRs are a fantastic opportunity to identify those areas of concern and remediate those with the support of the GCF and the IIU. So if I may just wrap up very quickly here and say that I would like to present us as an opportunity to collaborate. I think we are a natural ally in addressing integrity risks because our solutions seek to mitigate those issues and to feed any of these kind of risk mitigation strategies. I hope that wasn't too long and succinct to the point there.
No, thank you very much, Albert. Actually, you did quite well on the 5 minutes, and taking into account that the work that the Independent Integrity Unit is actually crucial for all the projects that we do carry. We do appreciate your taking the time, Albert, to be with us. And actually, as you've seen, probably there is a depth, not just of the issues, but also and mostly the richness of the answers that we've had here from Jack, from Keith, from Malik, from Claudia and Urvash. And we could actually stay here for quite a long time in trying, not only to go through all the challenges, but more interestingly, all the ideas and solutions that were given. So it's just that we do not have much time in order to discuss all of this, but we want to make sure that we do thank each and every one of our panelists for having come here. And we do encourage our discussion to continue. As you know, we have the WOVA application. Over there, you can go and put in comments and put in questions. And we encourage us to encourage all of you to continue the discussion with our colleagues of the regional desk, continue discussion when you're involved with projects, with the task managers and so on. And I really liked many of the things that were said today. Claudia, thank you very much for pointing out that we're all working towards the same objectives of having these high quality projects that are coming. Thank you very much, Jack, for pointing to the streamlining. I think both you and Keith have pointed to the streamlining that is needed in the processes in order to make it not only less onerous, but at the same time context, customize it to the needs. And thank you so much, DG Malik, for also pointing to the efforts that DAEs are making on their own in order to be able to go out there and avail themselves of resources in order to reinforce their capacities. So once again, I'd like to ask you to please have a round of applause for our panelists. Et merci encore, gracias for everything. And let's continue the discussion through WOVA and all the other avenues. Thanks again to our distinguished guests and panelists for having joined us today. And we wish you a nice evening. I think there's still a couple of sessions as well as some bilaterals that are still going on. And we look forward to additional comments that you'll be sharing and that we'll be able to reflect in our final reports. So thanks again.